A mega dungeon consisting of 365 rooms spread out over 12 distinct levels. A room for each day of the year, a level for each month. That is the concept behind Dungeon 23, and this is EVENNIGHT, my take on Dungeon 23. And in accordance with my personal tastes, it'll be a major love letter to Demon Souls, BERSERK, and all things dark and beautiful. So let's set the vibe and kick it off with a bang.
Far into his reign, old King Alaric, airless and fearing death's undoing of his great life's work, sent out 12 valiants, paragons of the kingdom of Windham, all to undertake a quest of grave consequence. Fierce warriors, living saints, and even those learned in the shadowy arts of sorcery. The hallowed 12 set forth to find the moon seed, the rudiment of legend, and bring the peerless artifact before their lord. Many seasons passed in vain pursuit, and the king sank into despair. It was on EVENNIGHT, the year's longest dark, a time that belongs to no god, and the king's humour was blackest, that the valiants at length returned. As the court sank into murmurs of concern and speculation, the 12 retreated with their liege, sequestering themselves deep within the royal keep, and for a full year no plea nor entreaty would rouse them, and the kingdom suffered in their absence. On the EVENNIGHT that marked the champion's return, the keep doors at long last opened, and in the darkness of that godless final day, chaos spilled forth, and above the kingdom rose a black sphere of vile unmatter, a grim, unholy thing, with a sordid hunger for moonlight, and in its shadow brought the kingdom under a foul, Fomorian curse, as Alaric's peers sent forth their troops to cordon off the twisting barrier dome. Risen where once a lush and prosperous kingdom stood, the months and years went by and brought no change to the implacable blockade. Yet on the 7th cycle's turning, after Windham's calamity, a wretch appeared, passing from within the barrier, as if the cursed thing were no longer there. The mute stranger bore a gaping wound in his chest, and in place of a heart, a prism of a most peculiar luminescence, the resonance of which seemed to ebb and flow with the unholy sphere's undulations under moonlight. 5 long years it took the realm's most learned minds to unlock the secrets of the translucent heartstone that, fueled by its wretched host, just as it sustained him to life, held within it the conjunction to bypass the unearthly enclosure. The feat was taxing on its poor, half-dead conduit, and only for a fleeting moment could the prism's power be harnessed. But even this brief glimmer of opportunity sufficed to set scholars' fancies reeling. And so, on the EVENNIGHT of the 12th year after its fall, a portal was made to reach into the forlorn remnants of once mighty Windham, and a group of 3 was sent, chosen from among the world's eminent powers, to unravel the mysteries of its doom. It is here, at a kingdom's dismal end, that our story begins.
An observatory on the edge of chaos. Dramatis personae. Several kings, chieftains, high priests, and other self-important people. A ragged stranger with a prism for a heart fastened to a contraption. The eyes and ears of our story. Nellike, born in the middle of a mercenary camp, courageous and suspicious. Murdoch, probably not his real name. Born in a brothel in a city of thieves, generous and wasteful. Quinn, born in an isolated farm on the frontier, ambitious and deceitful. And their patron of sorts, occasionally wise, Galerius the Elder. EVENNIGHT, 12 years after the fall of Windham and the coming of the sphere. It is the night where shadows are longest and people from highest king to lowest pauper hide away in their homes and keep the shutters closed against the starless night sky. Except on this even night, the kings are here, on a balcony overlooking a rotund central chamber of an observatory. And down there on the ground floor of the observatory is, in this pitch darkness, a little island of artificial light generated by a floating sphere. And far from keeping the shutters closed, the crystal glass ceiling of the observatory reveals the near-empty firmament with the new moon and the chaos orb floating above. Down in the illumination on ground level, a handful of silhouettes are clustered around a basalt stone portal, standing there rather senselessly in the middle of the space, seemingly not leading anywhere. 3 of the 5 look somewhat out of place in their traveling kit and weaponry, and they're variously either shifting nervously, staring at that jet black portal, or glancing at the 4th, a learned-looking older man, who in turn stands silently pondering the 5th, a motionless, emaciated figure who is strapped to a metal and wood contraption that is fastened with amber files and opaque tubes that run along the armrests that this figure is manacled to and disappear behind and potentially into their back. The strapped-in specimen is naked, save for a black satin blanket that somewhat preserves their modesty by being draped over the chest and slung around the hips. "It's almost time," Galerius says. "We commence at the proper convergence of the light." "It's moondark," remarks one of the 3, a hard-looking woman with a thick, coarse accent. "There is no light." This earns her an impatient glance from the hallowed scholar. "There is a quality to this darkness that shines much like the full moon, yet its seeming is hidden and it bears ill omens." And he continues gesturing at the portal. "It also works to open this for reasons I don't fully understand yet." And he trails off, stepping closer to this strapped-in wretch and lifts up the head by the hair somewhat brusquely. "But only if we channel it through the heartstone of this poor catatonic mannequin." And as he withdraws his hand, the head slumps forward again. And he looks to the sky. "Mere seconds now. Ready yourself." And on cue, the royalty up on the balcony starts murmuring, keeping up with events down below, and the 3 clustered around the portal shift nervously and step closer. And on some hidden observation, Galerius tears away the cloth covering the chest of this strapped-in wretch and reveals a jagged open wound with a prism inside that, as soon as the old sage waves a hand and makes the light from this floating sphere die down, leaving only the darkness of the moondark, picks up a pulse and lines up and syncs with the pulsations of the sphere in the sky and starts emitting an opaque beam that hits the portal, and where there was nothing in the portal before, now a tear forms and spreads a rift in the here and now that creates an opening. "Now!" Galerius barks, and the 3 step in. Hello friends, Anderson here. This is my contribution to Dungeon 23. This is EVENNIGHT, and if you'd like to know a bit more about Dungeon 23, more than in the initial couple of sentences of this video at least, may I refer you to the Questing Beast channel and the GLATISANT newsletter, especially issue 35, which contains a lot of information condensed down rather nicely and a lot of resources. You may also want to check out the growing and dedicated Dungeon 23 subreddit, or maybe even the Perplexing Ruins Discord, which has a dedicated Dungeon 23 channel. Now, Dungeon 23 is a building challenge for a mega dungeon, but this channel, well, has a certain spirit of play and improvisation, so that's what we're gonna do, which means we're not just gonna build a mega dungeon, but we will guide a party of 3 right through it. And also, since it's a video channel and I don't necessarily want to inundate your subscription feeds with daily videos, we will be making weekly videos that then cover the week's worth of rooms, 1 a day. And they'll be on a Sunday, which means today is the first day. And since the previous week was still the previous year, we have some time and only 1 room to build to go over all the overhead, of which there is some, to set the table for the future week's videos, so we can just go room to room to room to room, and the only time we have some overhead is in the first video of each month. So how are we actually going to do this? The plan is to use random generation and prompts, like I generally do, interpret them, string them along, build a dungeon room in a dungeon level, 1 for each month, and then using the Black Sword hack system, which is nice and lean and elegant and has some features, more on that later, will guide our party of 3 through the rooms we just built. And as for the party of 3, more on them later. Now, as for our framework for the dungeon project, the lore dump in the intro that you may have been subjected to has already, well, dropped a few hints that I've come up with a few things that determine the direction of where we're building and what kind of a setting we're operating in and such. So let me just quickly bring you up to speed where that stuff came from. The first element of it, which is this tying it into a, well, let's call it an astronomical phenom that somehow interacts with the moon and such. That is part of the stipulation that I put on myself for the Dungeon 23 challenge, which is that since we're following a rhythm of days and months in the building, I also kind of want to gamify that and make that matter inside of the dungeon itself. So we're tying it to moon phases, the passing of months, etc. The dungeon concept also should be one that allows for very distinct from one another levels, so having disparate areas of a sunken kingdom seemed like a pretty natural way to go, especially if they can only be accessed through immaterial portal type travel. And that pretty much made it click for me already. I kind of hit on the notion of how Demon Souls is set up, where there is a kingdom that is no longer accessible, fallen through a strange fog, and you can only kind of pass through the fog, and most people don't make it, and everyone who does make it is kind of strange and weird and mad, and that's where we're going with this as well. Except our fog is a chaos dome that has ruptured the kingdom and turned it into kind of floating islands in the chaos murk, whatever. And the only way to access it is through that portal, which can only be opened through this wretch with a prism for a heart type person that somehow showed up for whatever reason. Now, I also needed some kind of inciting incident for the thing to go bad that King Alaric did, and for that I actually gave myself a little bit of a random table that I made to just roll a die 4, and I hit upon the artifact notion, and I just created the artifact again based on the stars and constellations and such, and called it the Moon Seed. The king, by the way, might also have been a queen. I also rolled for that. And with the portal comes the chance for some biome diversity, because I've decided that it would make sense if we are talking refraction and chaos spheres and stuff. So every month this portal points to a different part of the dungeon of old Windham that fell. So I guess there also needs to be a way back for our party so they can re-enter, or maybe there needs to be some way to travel inside. Maybe those islands float around, or we'll figure it out. Anyway, and lastly, it wouldn't really be a fitting tribute to a Souls game if we didn't have very distinct bosses. And again, also that gives us a chance for a bit of biome diversity, because I kind of came up with these 12 valiants, again, one for each month of the year. I kind of want that theme to pulse through this. And those valiants are my plan for the area bosses. So each valiant has one zone of the dungeon under them, and they I guess are influencing how that zone looks and feels just through their own personalities and through their own personal histories and such. So between coming up with autonomous themes through random generation and then also taking the area boss and bashing that together, I'm sure we come up with fairly distinct and interesting dungeon levels. And since we're leaning into that whole From Software Berserk stuff, it's going to be very human-centric around here for this one, so not a lot of rolling on my ancestry table. We're going to have some, we'll see, I guess, some others, some outsiders, some more fey folk types or whatever we can think of, but for the most part, the valiants at least and the king, they may not be human anymore, but they started out as humans. What they are, well, I guess we'll see when we get there. That might actually sound like there is a lot already decided, but there is a large number of things that are just placeholders and that need to be connected through the building process that I don't really have more than a vague concept or idea for, and nothing for their interconnected. So, for instance, what was the king hoping to accomplish with the artifact? I have no idea. What is the moon seed? Is it even the moon seed, or did they bring back something cursed? And what does it do? What did it do? Who is that wretch? Why did they come out? And what's with that prism? I just kind of thought that was a cool visual to have that little bit of body horror and the prism for a heart thing going on, but beyond that I have nothing. What about the pantheon of this world? I kind of want to give some flavor to the months by giving each month the name of a deity of this world. So the first of Hullabaloo is... We'll roll for the names, of course, but beyond that, does it matter? Does it have any kind of influence? Do the gods have any influence in the chaos sphere? Which, incidentally, also ties into the concepts of order, chaos, and balance, which are present in the Black Sword Hack rule set, which was part of the reason I chose it, because we do have the chaos, but what about representations of order and balance? And how does that link up with, for instance, the Divine Pantheon and the moon phases? Is order stronger when there is a full moon in the I don't know. We'll see. I would like it to matter. There's also this line that the even night belongs to no god, whereas all the other months and days belong to a god. I have nothing for this either, besides it sounded cool when I kind of described it in the writing process, but why it doesn't belong to no god, did it once belong to a god, all of that we still need to figure out. And of course also, what's the point of all this dungeon? Like, what happens if our party doesn't succeed in whatever threat, counter threat they may discover once they go through the dungeon? Because surely they'll have to discover some threat there. So if we look at the beats of the story so far, we have this sequence of 12 years, and now we are in the 13th year, and at the end of the 13th year, on that next even night, surely some gestation period is over and something happens that we need to prevent, but what is that? I don't know. As you can see, there's a lot still to decide, to discover, and all of that good stuff. And if you want to participate, of course, that is always more than welcome. Drop a comment and let me know what your thoughts are on these various set pieces. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to follow along with the series. See, I shoehorned that in. Great, huh? We'll make a YouTuber out of me. I'm not kidding. All your input is always greatly welcome and appreciated. We've already done this a lot with Worlds Without Number, so this is going to be quite valuable to me. But now I think it's time to start setting the table for Nelica, Murdoch, and Quinn to enter before we actually figure out who Nelica, Murdoch, and Quinn actually are a bit further down in the episode. And for that, we need to do a little bit of prep work before we start designing the first room. We need to give that first room that we do today a context. And I think to begin with, we're gonna start with what month is it? I think I'm gonna go to the deities table of the Ultimate Toolbox, and that gives us Shiga, the goddess of peaceful darkness. That sounds extremely fitting, actually, since I guess it's the beginning of the year, the darkness, peaceful darkness, the darkest night is over, so her month belongs to the rebuilding, laying the groundwork for the new year. We also need to decide what our first zone type is, what its theme is, and perhaps even what its name is. And for that, I'd like to use the ruins table from Worlds Without Number, which on a 1 to 5 on a die 6 results has a bunch of categories with subcategories that give us a lot of input. On the 6, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, it's actually kind of cool, it has the Worlds Without Number setting Xenotech aspect in it. So on a 6, if we roll that, because I don't really feel that fits in here, I will consult the Perilous Wilds instead, because that also has a bunch of good tables to build a dungeon concept off of. So let's check out what our first theme is gonna be. Okay, we're heading into the Perilous Wilds. We're starting off with the offbeat resource, and rolling for a theme and a function, we get... It's an extraordinary theme, the Unquiet Dead, and the function is the stronghold or a sanctuary. So maybe a settlement overrun by the Unquiet Dead, or maybe like a keep, or maybe both. Actually, it could be like a border region if the first portal actually opens also on the borders of this Chaos Zone. We might have the border town with a border guard keep here to deal with, and it's the Unquiet Dead reside there. Let's use the Ultimate Toolbox to generate a town name for it. Gives us Galekirk. That sounds pretty good. Now, who is the first of our 12? Who is the big boss of Galekirk? And what are they like? And for this, I will be using something new, Realm Fables Miscellany, which has a villain design set of tables, a quite extensive set of villain design tables, actually. So we're gonna do a whole bunch of rolling and a whole bunch of editing, and then I will present you with the outcome. So between role, profession, archetype, crest, symbol, appearance, theme, villain's favorite weapons, and thematic styles, and all of that stuff, we come up with the following. We get a torturer executioner whose archetype is the bully. Symbol is the flame, and item of particular villainous nature is a suit of otherworldly armor. Favorite weapon is a large axe. There is a little bit of dice serendipity going on here while rolling a large axe for an executioner. The appearance is that the ears and nose have been cut away, leaving only gruesome scars. Thematic style, fittingly, is scarred, wild, filthy, and disheveled. That also fits together quite well. Negative trait is they're disloyal, positive trait is they're honest. And the backstory hook we generated was that an honored warrior planted a foul sickness within their sibling. That's an interesting one. And we'll roll on one of the fitting Ultimate Toolbox naming tables again for a name. That gives us Orin the Executioner, and it's a he. And now it's finally time for that damn first room that our party of 3 will arrive in. And considering we are now aware that we are not crawling through, well, let's say a classic dungeon in the first level, but we're still in a kind of a surface area or a town/keep type of area, I'm gonna approach this more from the design of a town/village, and then transport the layout into something that resembles dungeon rooms. So let's say we start off in a cellar of a shop, and then we go out, the street is a corridor, and then the houses are perhaps no longer all standing, so there'll be a bunch of ruins and detritus that kind of serves as walls, and then all the accessible parts of the buildings are our dungeon rooms. And I guess the mission statement here will probably be to work our way towards the keep, where I would expect Orin the Executioner to hang out. And in light of that, while I was originally planning to use Tome of Adventure Design or Dungeons & Dragons DM Guide First Edition or something dungeon generation-y, I think I'm gonna approach this from a town angle and use a book of town locations that I haven't used much, which is simply called Random Table Cities and Towns by Dr. Tim Woods. And it has a buildings die 100 table where you can even give it the certain bonuses from having a town be impoverished or particularly rich. And I guess this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. I think it's either impoverished, low, or average for the results we want to generate. So I'm going to roll a die 6, 1 to 2, impoverished, and so on. It's impoverished, so let's roll our percentage die. Impoverished services. Our portal opens into the abode of one of these people that we determine by rolling a die 12. 5, the Dogfight Pitmaster. Okay, we are opening a portal into the house or cellar of the Dogfight Pitmaster. 50-50. Anything under 50 is the cellar. Okay, into the cellar we go. And we'll use the Tome of Adventure Design to determine the shape and size, which we do using a 100 die roll. A square room of 20 by 20 feet, which is 6 meters. So that's why I have the laptop here, by the way, to do conversions and stuff and take a lot of notes, because there will have to be a lot of notes taken. And I guess our scale for this is then 3 meter or 10 feet. So we'll start off making our room. And I'm picturing this room sort of not having direct access to the probably fairly modest home of this pit fighting master, but that it sort of exits towards the path outside, towards whatever road this is situated on, and sort of a angled wooden cover you can kind of pull open and descend down into this cellar where he keeps whatever. We'll figure it out. So I'll put down some stairs and the exit goes up. And this is the Dogfighting Pitmaster cellar. Now we'll break out the books of random tables for some dungeon dressing. I'll use the items in a bandit hideout from book 1 of the Book of Random Tables, because it also has like caged animals and stuff, so that seems quite fitting. And we roll. In the corner of this square room, there is a table with a pile of 8 wolf pelts, and sitting on one of the edges, a small leather bag that on closer inspection is filled with human teeth. Next to the table is a small cage squirming with a group of rats, half starved, half maddened, some of which have started eating each other. And most of the rest of the low, dank smelling, earthen floored space is taken up by rusty, empty cages, their doors hanging even somewhat askew in their hinges, not being very well maintained. Now, is anything happening here? For that, we'll use the campaign notebook by Perplexing Ruins, and we use the dungeon die, a die 8 roll, to figure out whether there's anything to this room, whether there is a discovery to be made or encounter to be had. 2. There is nothing more to this room than a bunch of wolf pelts, a bag of teeth, and some half-crazed, starving rats. So that is our first creation. Now we should send in our intrepid explorers, but before we can do that, we actually need to meet them a bit more than just superficially in an intro that already feels like it's miles away. So we've already learned their names, the circumstances of their birth, and some of their character traits, all of which, by the way, I randomly generated, and through the magic of editing I can actually... And as I sit here editing this behemoth of a video, I realize that it's going to run way too long if I leave the character creation in this one, so we'll have a second installment, a 1.5 if you will, in a few days, probably Thursday, so stay tuned and I'll see you in the next one. So thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.